Hello everyone and welcome back to my COVID-19 lecture series. This video is going to be a little different as I will talk about two very STEM-heavy concepts. However, I'll try to make it easy to comprehend with the use of diagrams, as you all have seen in my previous videos. So let's begin. Alright, let's start this video with a mathematical concept that has been transformed into multiple stories over the centuries. As a life lesson about arrogance, I presume. Who knows? Sometimes it is called the gold coins in the chessboard problem. At times it is called the wheat in the chessboard problem. No matter what cultural story you use to understand this concept, the chessboard seems to be the key central aspect. So as you can see, for my explanation, I'm also going to use the chessboard, which I've shown here on the screen. Here's the story. There was a king. He had a daughter, his only heir. She gets very sick, and none of the advisors or the medical staff of the king is able to help her. As her condition gets worse over time, the king hears of a magician in the outskirts of his kingdom who can help her. He calls for that magician. Long story short, the magician is able to treat the daughter. The king is ecstatic, and he tells the magician to ask him anything he wants. No price is too high. The magician notices a chessboard sitting next to the king's throne. He asks that the king places gold coins on each square of that chessboard, and the total sum of coins on the board at the end would be his salary. The only caveat, though, is that every time the king places gold coins on the next square, he doubles them. The king laughs and says that is no trouble at all, asking his advisors to bring gold coins and start placing them on the board. If you don't have a lot of background in mathematics, this doesn't seem that big a problem. Let me explain. On the first square, you put one gold coin. On the second square, you double it. You put 2. On the third, you double this 2, so you put 4. 8. The next one is 16. The one after that is 32. And you keep going. If you're a math nerd, kind of like how I am, you would write this as an equation with y equals 2 power x, where x is the number of boxes on the chessboard in this case. Let me explain. So 2 power 0 equals 1, because any number to the power 0 is 1. 2 power 1 would be 2. 2 squared, or 2 power 2, would be 4. 2 cubed, or 2 power 3 would be 8, and so on and so forth. Let's keep going. This is the definition of an exponential graph. If this is the x-axis, and this is the y-axis, and you draw this graph, this is what the graph would look like. This is what an exponential graph looks like. And in this example of the chessboard, this number over here would be 2 to the power 64, because there are 64 squares on a chessboard, 8 in this direction and 8 in this direction. So this number here is the 64th square on a chessboard. And to find the number of gold coins on this square, you would have to do 2 power 64, which is a massive number in the billions. And that takes me to this graph here, which was created by a senior colleague and mentor, Dr. Kashif Chaudhary, who is a cardiac electrophysiologist. He created this graph and shows in blue the Italian population and in orange the American populations with COVID cases that have been daily reported. You see here that the American trajectory is following essentially the same path, if not worse, just 10 days behind. In blue here is the Italian population with an exponential increase in their daily cases of the COVID load, and in orange here is the American population with an increased incidence of daily COVID cases. This takes me back to my initial video from a few days ago where I talk about that the healthcare system will not be able to cope with the intense number of COVID cases that will rush into the hospitals. So we need to experience social distancing and try to mitigate the effect of the COVID spread. So when more and more people are infected with the virus, the healthcare resources are able to cope with them. And I agree that the example I gave on the previous slide with the chessboard, that would imply that the number of cases are doubling every single day. But according to the best estimates, the number of COVID cases are doubling every 3 to 4 days. So the steep the slope of the graph is not as steep as it would as in the exponential case of the chessboard example, but it is still an exponential increase, and it is still a very steep graph, just not as steep as the one that I would assume to happen in the gold coins in the chessboard example. To explain what I mean, I'm going to use this paper by Dr. Neyman and Dr. Irvin, who are both practicing ER physicians in the Detroit, Michigan area. Conventionally, we have a ventilator and we have a patient. There's one port or tube that is coming out of the ventilator and going into the patient. And then there's another port that is coming out of the patient and that goes into the ventilator. So one ventilator, one patient. That is the standard. However, in cases where there is a massive increase in load on the healthcare system, we can use one ventilator to intubate and stabilize either 2 or 4 patients. For this example, I'm going to show you how to do it with 4 patients. However, you got to change the attachments a little bit to make it work with 2 patients. Now, mind you got to do it both ways. One for the port that is coming out of the ventilator, and again for the port that is going into the ventilators. Again, for this example, I'm only going to focus on the tube that is coming out of the ventilator, so my image doesn't become all chicken scratchy. But mind you got to do it for the port that is going into the ventilator as well. So the port that is coming out of the ventilator, you either use a T tube or a Y tube, both will work, and you make that one port into 2 ports. And then once you have that, you attach 2 more Y tubes or T tubes, whichever one your hospital seems to carry, and you create that into 4 ports. This way you can have one patient over here, one patient over here, one over here, and then one over here. You see that you can intubate 4 patients with 1 ventilator. All you need are these T tubes or Y tubes that exist here. Every hospital has that. This exact setup was replicated and implemented back in 2017 during the Las Vegas shooting. Dr. Kevin Menace was the ER doctor at the time, and he had a massive influx of patients with torso and CNS trauma injuries. The patient influx severely outnumbered the ventilators on hand. Turns out, Dr. Menace was a resident under the guidance of Drs. Neyman and Irvin back in 2006, and he remembered the study and found the perfect time to implement it. With amazing results. He was able to stabilize critical patients for hours before they were out of danger, and they could be moved to regular hospital beds. This comes with a few caveats though. Since multiple patients are attached to the same ventilator, we need to make sure that the lung sizes are the same or at least comparable. You cannot have a pediatric patient and an adult patient attached to the same ventilator. That is because the tidal volume for both lungs needs to be the same for this to work. Tidal volume is the volume of air that a person breathes in and out during a regular inspiration cycle. So, a regular person has a tidal volume of 500. If 2 patients are attached to the same ventilator, we need to set the tidal volume to about 1,000, so that both patients can get about a 500 volume of tidal volume. If 4 patients are attached to the same ventilator, we need to increase the tidal volume to about 2,000. This way, 4 patients each can get 500 cc's of tidal volume. The other thing is that the 2 or the 4 patients who are attached to the same ventilator need to have the same resistance to flow of air. What this means is that patients who have pulmonary or lung diseases, they need to be attached to the same ventilator together. And somebody who does not have a pulmonary disease will have a low resistance to flow. Therefore, they cannot be attached to somebody who has a pulmonary condition. One last thing before I end this video. So the flow equation tells us that the flow of any fluid is dependent on multiple factors. The one that we care about in this case is the length of the tubing. So if we have a ventilator and we attach it to 4 patients, we will see that the patients over here and the here on the each end have a longer length of the tube, which means they have a decreased flow. So for this to work properly, the solution is to have the ventilator in the center and then have the 4 patients on either side of the ventilator. This will ensure that the length of the tubing remains constant, which maintains the flow that goes to each patient, and this is another caveat that needs to be taken into consideration. Again, all of these are solutions to the problem that we are about to face with the massive influx of patients who need these ventilators. the first and foremost thing that we all need to do is to exhibit social distancing and to flatten the curve. So we need to stay home because at the end of the day, we will have the patients come into the hospital who need these ventilators and who need these admissions, but we only can increase the ventilator volume by so much. So again, I urge all of my listeners and all my viewers to please experience social distancing, to please stay isolated, and please work as together as you can with the other society members to decrease the spread of this disease. Hopefully, I'll see you guys soon, and stay safe and stay healthy out there.